And understanding that we're not broken is such an important first step. As a matter of fact, in my model that I've created, Conscious Recovery, the foundational principle is underneath all addictive behavior is an essential self that is whole and perfect. That's a very different starting point than I'm broken and I need to fix myself. Or if someone is watching or listening right now who is a healer of some type, do I view the people I'm working with as broken and think it's my job to fix them? That can keep us really stuck. We want to look for the wholeness within the person or within ourselves as a starting point, and then we can start to heal ourselves from that tender age. Because usually what happens is something didn't get expressed or felt, and now it's our responsibility as adults to do that for ourselves.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about hidden barriers to happiness. I am delighted to welcome TJ Woodward. TJ is a best-selling author, inspirational speaker, chief wellness officer, the creator of the Conscious Recovery Method, and a featured thought leader on wholehearted.org, along with Brene Brown, Dr. Gabor Mate, and others. You can reach TJ at his website, tjwoodward.com, and I'll include that link in the show notes. Welcome, TJ. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Oh, thank you so much, Linda. I'm so delighted to be here with you for this conversation.
Thank you. And I appreciate your wisdom that you bring to the table because it matters. And I would love, if it's okay, can we start with your story? What is your transformation journey?
Well, that could be at least a 1 hour conversation. I've had many, but I will say that early in my life, my earliest memories are actually memories of being very, very happy. And I like to start with that because to me, that's the innate experience of being human. We come into the world wide open, blank canvas, essentially whole and complete, and get programmed by the world to believe that we're other than that. And that was definitely my experience. I remember having an experience of my heart closing when I was 7 years old. Discovered drugs and alcohol at age 14, which brought some relief, albeit temporary. Got sober when I was 21. And that kind of started my journey of transformation. And I found myself suicidal. About 18 months later, I met a woman. Her name is Mary Helen, and she took me on a journey of reconnecting with my true nature. I've had many transformation stories since then, but that's really the way I always like to start the conversations.
Wow. Okay. You brought out so many important things. And I appreciate that you said we start happy because often our earliest memory is that time when our heart closes and we forget that there was a time before. But our heart couldn't close if it wasn't open in the first place. And I know we're going to talk about that later. So I don't know what your issue is, but I believe you. And whatever it is, our heart closes, our story changes. Everything about us changes. And turning to substances to try to numb, to try to deflect those uncomfortable feelings and thoughts is very normal. And I hope it becomes more and more apparent as we talk about it that when we're dealing with addictions and substance issues, it is often the solution, not the problem. Or it's intended to be something to cover us. And if we get through the deeper thing, then things get better. What concerns me about your story is you said when you got sober, but probably we hadn't addressed the underlying issue yet, then you felt suicidal. Is it because you didn't have something to cover, to numb, and now you had to deal with it?
Yeah, I think absolutely. It was just such a gift to be sober in the beginning, right? The first year or year and a half of my recovery. But as you so beautifully said, I hadn't yet addressed any of the underlying root causes that caused me to look to substances for relief. And I guess it was a thawing out, or it was a moment where I realized I had to meet something much deeper within myself that really gave me the opportunity. I mean, it showed up in the form of not wanting to be alive, but that sense of not wanting to be alive actually was the catalyst for me to make some significant changes. And for me, the underlying root causes of my addiction were unresolved trauma, spiritual disconnection, and toxic shame. And in my work, I've been working in the addiction treatment field for since 2008. And that is my experience as well. I see that as a common denominators. Those three things seem to show up in almost everyone, if not everyone I've ever worked with who's coming out of an addiction.
Is it okay if we expound on those then? Just can we go one at a time?
Yeah.
All right. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with shame or do we want to start with trauma or
Let's start with trauma. I mean, the experience that I had of closing my heart, as you said, it was first of all a recognition that my heart was wide open before that, but there were so many things happening in my life and in the world. I was recently someone made a comment on one of my videos, and I thought it was kind of funny, but he said, "Is this guy really saying that he has an addiction?" Or he actually used the term addict. He's an addict because he couldn't tie his shoes in kindergarten. What is this, an SNL skit? And I thought it was funny, but of course, I did not say in the video that the one thing that caused my addiction was I couldn't tie my shoes. But I was pointing to that sometimes when we think of trauma, we think that it needs to be something very significant, which of course it can be. But there are also more subtle traumas, and for me, it legitimately was a life-changing moment when I couldn't tie my shoes, and I remember at that moment very deeply feeling like I was broken, I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't good enough. And that became kind of the unconscious operating system for my life. So, yes, people do experience some significant traumas. I've had some that would fit into that category, but there's also these seemingly smaller things that to one person might really be completely insignificant, but to another person, it can be that one moment, even though it seems something small, that actually is something so monumental in their own journey.
I am so glad you brought that up. Thank you. When we talk about unresolved trauma and the go-to for my mind, everybody's mind, is we have abuse that we're dealing with. We're dealing with some horrific experience that you could put on the news. And for many people, that is true,
Yeah.
but not for all of us. And yet it seems that we all have things that we're dealing with. For me, my trauma was not unlike yours, where it was not something that would be put on the news. It was my parents experienced an emotional trauma and shut down. And I thought, well, I guess it was me. I did it. I'm not lovable. I'm not whatever. And so it's people, in my case, who are really trying to do their best and handling their own situations. And they didn't have time or space for me. They were dealing with their own garbage. And they aren't bad people in any way, shape, or form. They were just dealing with their own stuff. So thank you. Because sometimes, like you said, when someone makes a comment like, really, is this a skit, a comedy thing? Seriously, it it made me even more ashamed of my brokenness that there wasn't a a, a major cause that I could justify myself in explaining to someone else. So it was, I am broken and I can't talk about it because it's too embarrassing.
That's right. And I think something that you said is so important, and I want to lean into. Often children, especially like ages like 4 through 10, they have very concrete thinking. If a parent is upset, or if a parent leaves, or if a parent passes away, or if parents get divorced, the child can blame themselves. And we understand as adults logically that that wasn't the case, but it doesn't change the experience because when we're really young, we end up burying these things deeply in our unconscious or our subconscious. And even though logically we understand, well, my parents had their own trauma. That's why when people will say things like, well, my parents did the best they could. Well, that can be true. And still, we want to know what that was like for us as a small person. And the key to this is healing it is not a cerebral or an intellectual process because our brains weren't even developed. And we will say things like, well, it wasn't your fault. Well, of course, that's true. And we understand that, but it felt like it was. So the healing must go back to that original place and we can start to reparent ourselves and change that experience rather than just intellectually saying, well, they did the best they could, or, well, it wasn't your fault. There's something much deeper at play as well.
Oh, amen to that. Yes. Are we going to talk more about that?
I would love to.
Yes,
Absolutely.
please.
Yeah, I mean, when I got into my own recovery and then ultimately started exploring a lot of different spiritual paths, I remember thinking that if I could figure out exactly what happened, I would somehow fix it. And I'm using the term fix very consciously because at that time, I still felt broken. An understanding that we're not broken is such an important first step. As a matter of fact, in my model that I've created, Conscious Recovery, the foundational principle is underneath all addictive behavior is an essential self that is whole and perfect. That's a very different starting point than I'm broken and I need to fix myself. Or if someone is watching or listening right now who is a healer of some type, do I view the people I'm working with as broken and think it's my job to fix them? That can keep us really stuck. We want to look for the wholeness within the person or within ourselves as a starting point, and then we can start to heal ourselves from that tender age. Because usually what happens is something didn't get expressed or felt, and now it's our responsibility as adults to do that for ourselves.
Wow. Yes, absolutely. The starting point to go back to that beginning, the before the feeling broken. It's not that I am broken, it's that I felt broken. And usually that feeling broken comes with some story that we made up. And I hope we're going to talk about that as well. Our feelings of brokenness come from maybe something happened and I'm doing my best. Let's say I'm a child and I'm trying to explain how or why or what. And we come up with something like, oh, that must have been my fault. Oh, I must be stupid. Oh, I must be broken. In my case, I have wonderful parents who are so loving. And people tell me all the time, you have the most loving parents in the world. And I did not feel loved at all. And the story that in my mind was, even the most loving people in the world can't love you. And so that was the story that it was the only thing that made sense in my 6 year old little mind of why they didn't want me. Um, and even when you go back as an adult and you look at it again and you do that, oh, they did the best they can, the best they could, it still isn't quite enough to go back and fix that underlying story. We have to look at that. And that's something that you do, correct?
Yes, and I invite that we look at the story, but even more than that, we look at the frequency that's attached to the story. And the reason I say that is I think a lot of times we say things like change the narrative, become aware of the story we're carrying. Some modalities will offer opposite action. You know, if you feel broken, show up anyway, and eventually you won't feel broken. And I think there's something useful there. Or we say rewrite the story, and I think there's something useful there. The deeper work for me is to go back and realize that, as I already said, we didn't have the cognitive ability. Our brains weren't even developed. So it is a story, but it's so much more than that. It's really more of a vibration or a frequency. And so for me at age 7, when I decided I was unlovable, not good enough, and broken, that like it was literally a physical sensation, Linda. And then I was carrying that around into my adult life. And I kept asking myself, why do I keep repeating the same things over and over and over again? I thought this relationship would be different. I thought this job would be different. I thought once I had this in place, I could feel differently about myself. The deeper work was, as you already said so beautifully, it's inside out, not outside in. So going back and realizing that I absorbed and decided these huge things with very limited information. And I can actually go back and heal that and change not only the story that, like you're saying, which is important, but also start to work on that vibration or frequency.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you brought up that some of the things that we do, we've talked about some of the negative coping things, which are we might go to addictions, or we might do something, or we can seek for outside validation. Like, I would be good enough if I will be lovable when, if we can reach this certain milestone or this certain whatever it is we're trying to achieve. And then you get there and it didn't work.
That's
And
right.
it's so frustrating. Dang, I thought this relationship would save me. Darn it, I thought this job or whatever it might be. And it still requires that we have to look inside. Darn it. And yet when we do, It is wonderful. There's something better on the other side. And this is a message I want to shout from the rooftops. It is so normal to want to not go there. In fact, I recently spoke with a person who helps trying to help with first responders in reducing suicide because there are people, a lot of people, who would rather die literally than face their emotions, than look inside. And so we're saying, I don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want to. I would rather be addicted to substances. I would rather numb it. I would rather scroll on my phone. I would rather do anything. Don't make me look inside. It's scary. And so what we're saying is, guys, it's better on the other side. And if you don't know that it's better, then we're not going to that scary place.
That's right. And I think this is so important because in my work with people who have a classic addiction, right? When we think of addiction, we might think of drugs and alcohol, but you name so many other ways we can be addicted, right? An outer focused life, striving to get the perfect position at work. It could be shopping, it can be look good, it can be scrolling on the phone, whatever it is we're using to distract ourselves. Most often it is running from something, and most often it's not conscious. So I don't think most people are sitting around saying, oh, I have this sense of unresolved trauma and I have this sense of shame about myself and I feel broken. I wonder if there's something I can find to bring relief. No, it doesn't happen that way. What happens is we find something and then it's like, oh, I feel better. And that's why I don't call addiction a coping mechanism. I call it a brilliant strategy because it was brilliant for me. The issue is, as we have said, we might believe that if we face this, it's going to be scary or it's going to be painful. And it might be true that it's scary or painful to face it. But the deeper truth is it's even scarier or more or painful to keep running from it. There's this amazing story that Pema Chodron tells in one of her books about these two young girls. And one of them is having a nightmare every night. And every night in her dream, this monster is chasing her. And it's one of those dreams where she's in a long hallway and trying to open all the doors and they're all locked. And the other little girl says to her, well, what does the monster look like? And she says, I don't know. I've never had the courage to look. So, of course, the next night she's having the recurring dream and she's running down the hallway and the doors won't open. And she hears her friend's voice. What does the monster look like? So she stops in the dream and she turns around and she faces the monster. And the next day she says to her friend, oh my gosh, the monster was hideous. It was so scary. My body was shaking and I was trembling. And then she described in great detail what the monster looked like. And of course, we know where the story's going. Then the dreams were able to stop. The nightmares were able to stop. And that really, to me, is the nature of addiction. I'm running from and hiding from this sense of being with myself, this felt sense that if I feel this, it's going to envelop me. But the truth is, I'm spending my whole life running down this hallway. And when I'm willing to face it and feel it, it actually does heal it.
That's beautiful. And as you were telling the story and I was guessing what was going to come next, I thought when you turned around, the monster wasn't scary, that it was going to be something like, oh, it was really, flowers and sunshine and balloons, and I didn't need to run in the first place. And that wasn't it. It
Right.
really was horrible. It really was awful. And it went away.
That's right. And we don't want to minimize that because I think sometimes we might want to say to someone, well, it's not that scary to look. No, it is. Let's acknowledge the pain we've been running from. That's why we create a safe container, whether that's a safe relationship, a safe therapist, safe community, ultimately internal safety, where we can start to look at these darker aspects. And that really is indeed the way we heal it.
Fantastic. All right. Should we go to some toxic shame?
Yes, let's switch over to some toxic shame. Yes, I describe the sense of shame as swimming in oatmeal. I love that definition because that this sense of brokenness, this belief that there's something fundamentally wrong with me. I think we all know by now the way we most often frame the difference between guilt and shame is guilt is I feel like I've done something wrong. but shame is I believe I am wrong. And we work with them very, very differently. When we can move someone out of shame and into guilt, that's wonderful news because it's easier to do something with guilt, but shame really takes the deeper work of where did this originate and how do we heal it from that point of origin?
Oh, absolutely. And isn't it wonderful that we have some vocabulary to help make that distinction so that we can say, oh, okay, I didn't even realize, like you mentioned before, no one is saying, I feel this way and I'm trying to cover it. I just feel better. And with shame, it's the same thing. I just feel not enough. I just feel broken. And I think when we start to be able to put some words to things, it it helps us to be able to look at the monster a little bit.
That's right. And the way we work with shame is by bringing it into the light. Because, and I love Brene Brown, she talks about shame, living in secrecy, silence, and judgment. She talks about what are the conditions that shame needs to thrive, secrecy, silence, and judgment. So the opposite of that, however we frame it, is some version of vulnerability, transparency, openness, authenticity. So again, we find safe places to really share what is happening for us and what did happen in our lives. And it's through that sharing that we can start to heal that shame because it has to see the light of day. And in order for it to survive, we have to keep it secret. And that is the most paradoxical thing about shame. It's the last thing I ever want to tell anyone, but it's exactly the thing that keeps it alive is not telling someone.
Isn't that crazy? And really, that's why we're here today. That's why we have these conversations, because there are many people who are trying to keep things hidden. And as other people have the courage to say, this is what I felt, this is what I experienced, this is what I did about it, then it helps people get a little bit more courage of, they said that out loud, that they were feeling that way, that this happened, and they didn't die and they got better. And so if we talk, here we are having a conversation. Guys, it's okay. It's okay. And you're not broken. You are innately, inherently whole.
Yes. And the thing about the shame is if is it's like a heavy blanket, right? That's why the oatmeal analogy works. And if we, like we said before, really reality is created by our frequency. So what does that mean? If I believe I'm broken, there's a certain frequency attached to that. One of my stories was I'm unlovable, right? Which is all part of this shame umbrella. I'm broken. I'm not good enough. I'm unlovable. I'm not worthy. And so my strategy to manage feeling unlovable was please love me, please love me, please love me. If I can find the perfect relationship, then I can heal this shame. And again, that wasn't conscious, but that's what I was attempting to do. But the core vibration, the frequency of the I'm not lovable was vibrating. And I would walk into a room and find the person that would confirm that core false belief. So when we heal from the outside in, it's not as much when we heal from the outside in, we think that perfect person will come along and then we'll be better. When we heal from the inside out, we understand that we heal it from the point of origin, and then we start to feel lighter and lighter and lighter, and that changes that frequency. And suddenly, I find myself choosing relationships that are more loving because I realize I'm worthy of it, and then I also can offer that, right? So a shame spiral is I feel broken, I act broken. I feel shame because of what I just did, and it's a downward spiral. When we interrupt that and heal that, I start to feel better about who and what I am. I choose more loving relationships. I act more loving in the world. And that's an upward love spiral, right? So they both work in the same way. The question is, what do I really want and what am I willing to do to work with it?
Ooh, what do I want? And what am I willing to do to work with it? Okay. So TJ, I'm having a spiral of shame. Or we'll go to your relationship thing. I don't feel lovable, but I know I'm going to find that one person who loves me, and all of a sudden everything is solved. But it didn't work out, and now I just got broke my heart broken again. How do I interrupt that cycle? What do I do?
Well, I like to ask, well, because you had earlier, you had said maybe you didn't say this, but this is sort of the spirit of it or what I heard. I might manifest everything that I think will make me happy, and it didn't really change anything. Or it could be that was clinging to this relationship to feel lovable, and then the person left me. So, whatever the scenario is, we have an opportunity at that moment. And the way we know that this is an opportunity is if I hear myself saying something like, I can't believe this person was the same as all the other ones. I can't believe this job was the same as all the other ones. Why does this keep happening to me? When we hear ourselves saying things like that, that's the opportunity to heal. And when we start to work on that, I would invite people to look at what are the core false beliefs? And I call them core false beliefs because I like to add that they're lies that we're carrying, that I've been carrying around that have been replicating themselves in what I call reality. And what's that point of origin? And how do I heal them in that way? Because, from a very early age, we see in movies that the person will come along and save us, or we'll just meet Prince or Princess Charming and everything will be fine, right? And we know that's not really how life works.
No, unfortunately, it has to come from the inside out. And I loved when you mentioned it really does come from the inside out. Our experiences come from the inside out. And we reiterated a couple times, and that's a good thing because sometimes we have to hear it a few times before we believe it, and we might not even believe it then. But if we watch for the patterns, why is this always happening? Why is this, why are they the same? That is because this is a signal from the universe saying it's because it's coming from the inside. And you've mentioned frequency a couple times. Do you have some suggestions for us? How do we find out what that is and how do we change it?
Well, I think what we're saying is that the best way to start, what are those repeating patterns that keep happening over and over again? And you said it so beautifully. If I hear myself saying, why does this or why is this? I know I'm in that pattern. Why does this keep happening? Why is this relationship like the last one? Why don't I feel better when I manifested the house, the car, the partner, all the things that I thought would make me happy? And we want to switch that to what is the belief I have about myself? What is the story I have about myself? Or what is that felt sense that I have, that vibration? Because I used to think it was about raising my vibration, and I used to say it that way, like, let's raise our vibration. Now I've really framed it a little bit differently. It's all available to us if we're old enough to remember radios. I remember being a kid and watching, the dial being changed, and then suddenly a different song would come on. And of course, as a kid, I thought that was magic. How is that happening? Are all these songs just floating around in the air? That's kind of how consciousness works. It's all available to us. What frequency do I want to tune into? If it's true, and in my experience it is, that we come in wide open and infinite and loving, and you look at a baby and you see their infinite potential, right? If we came in with that frequency, we can actually tune back into that joy, that happiness. I believe our natural state is joy. If you look at a very small child, like a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, they are naturally filled with joy. And then if an experience happens, they feel the emotion, they feel it boldly, they release that emotion, and they go back to that sense of joy until they experience trauma or until they get taught you shouldn't, boys shouldn't cry, or go to your room till you can stop crying, or, stop making a scene, all the things we say to a kid. So if you look at a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, they naturally do. Another way to say it is we naturally did everything we're seeking in recovery or therapy or a spiritual community or spiritual practice. I want to be more present. I want to be more loving. I want to learn how to feel my feelings. That's all innate in the human experience. So that frequency must still be available to us somewhere within us.
That's beautiful. And I love the part when you said watching that 2-year-old and 3-year-old, and then you switched it and said, remembering that I was a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. That's just a reminder it is inside of us. Not only it was, but it's still there. And this gives us some accountability in turning that radio dial back into that state of joy. It takes some choosing.
It does. And, sometimes we do what we call a spiritual bypass, where we just only look for the joy and try to tune into the joy. But I think there's also so much, I mean, I know there's so much value also in healing what we call the shadow or the darker aspects of life. So our job, I think Rumi said our job is not to seek for love, but to look at the barriers we put in the way of that love. That's a paraphrase, of course, but that's kind of how it works too, right? Because yes, our natural state is joy. And yes, I want to figure out how to tune back into that frequency. I also want to look at all the ideas and beliefs and experiences that I've had that have seemingly prevented me from experiencing or tuning into that joy. So it's really a lot about unlearning. And one way we can work with that is to question everything we believe to be true. Isn't it interesting that I am having this thought? What else is possible here? Where did I first start deciding I was broken? What might it feel like if I were to tune back into the frequency of joy? We can ask a lot of open-ended questions that can help us start to dismantle and unlearn, because the truth is our thoughts and perspectives aren't as solid as we might believe. I know for myself, it's going to be really hard to change this narrative. What if it's not as hard? What if it's not about um, forcefully changing the story, but just starting to question it allows for some air, it allows for some room, and then I can remember that natural state that is joy.
You brought up another childlike attribute of curiosity.
Yes.
So when we're feeling whatever it is we're feeling, rather than saying, this is what I do because that's what I do, or this is what I do because that's what I've done, it is, this is what I'm doing. I wonder why.
Yeah.
And just that becoming aware, I absolutely agree. It is the first step. We can't really fix a problem that we don't recognize that we have.
Yeah. Curiosity expands and judgment restricts. And so I always have a choice. Do I want to move into curiosity? How many times have we heard, we don't change until we get to the edge of our comfort zone, or we expand our comfort zone? And so it might be comfortable to see the world in the way I've always seen it. Most of that is not conscious, and most of us aren't even aware we're doing it. I didn't even realize that it was my point of view that created reality. I thought the world was happening. I had judgments of the world. I didn't realize that they were really judgments of me projected outward. And so when I started to understand that the way I shift what I call reality is, as we have said, from the inside out, curiosity. Oh, I wonder what I'm making this mean. I wonder what else is possible here. What would happen if I were to look for the love here? We often hear everything is love or fear, and I think it's Course in Miracles said everything is love or a request for love. I wonder what the request for love is here. I wonder what might happen if I were to look for the wholeness in this person instead of the brokenness. That, of course, can be the person in the mirror, or it can be the person we're in a relationship with.
That phrase, a request for love, is just pinging in my brain.
Mhm.
How does that apply to everything? That request for love, especially when we feel unlovable. It creates a longing of, I really want this. I know I can't have it, but I really want this. But I know it's not available to me, but I really want this. And it's never satisfied because we don't allow it in, because we've already made the decision that I'm not lovable. And so we can't let it in.
Yeah. And, we will often hear things like, why do I keep attracting unavailable people? And I would say, what do you want them to be available for? Right? Because there is this interesting nuanced dance of, I want to be in a loving relationship, or I want more loving friends in my life, or I want a satisfying career, whatever that statement is, but I don't really deserve it. That's one layer. And then you and I have already said, if I also understand that getting that thing that I think will make me happy is not going to make me happy, it starts with happiness. We talk about the law of attraction a lot. We change our vibration so we can attract new things in our lives. I have changed that to the law of radiance. I want to radiate the love that I am looking for into the world. life becomes a great experiment. When I know love is who and what I am, and I'm radiating that into the world, I will experience more of that in my daily interactions. So again, we're repeating it, I think, and that's beautiful that we keep saying it's from the inside out, not the outside in. Even that awareness, just that dedication to asking ourselves, I wonder if this is more from the inside out than the outside in, that will change someone's life immediately. Not looking for the world to bring us love, but asking, where is the love within me and how can I bring that to the world? That in itself will change someone's reality instantaneously.
Yes. And it's so empowering because we have control over us. And I don't have control over the world and the outside circumstances. That means that there's something I can do about my situation. And that is huge. It is empowering. It also involves being accountable and responsible. And some people would rather chuck that one. It's worth it to just be, the paper bag floating in the wind, if as long as I don't have to be in charge of me. But it's more empowering when we accept it. And it's true.
Yes, and it's interesting because I was thinking of the phrase ignorance is bliss, like being unaware that I'm the creator of my own reality. There's something about that that's really comforting, but it also keeps me really stuck, right?
Right.
When I believe the world was happening to me, there was when I wasn't accountable for my own reality, there was something about that that was seemed easier. But once I become aware, we can't become unaware. Once I understand that it's from the inside out, not the outside in, it is a mixed thing because it's this wonderful new revelation. Then it's like, oh, I'm responsible. And the way I say it is nothing is more painful than 99% surrender. So if I believe that I'm responsible for my reality 99%, I think I suffer more than it's just, oh, the world's just happening to me. When I realize it's 100% my responsibility. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying there aren't things that happen in the world that are difficult or challenging. And yet, it is my point of view about that that creates my reality about it.
Right. Right. Even as we change ourselves, things happen to us, but we get to choose our responses. And we are
That's
in a more empowered place to be able to handle whatever comes our way and to be resilient. And and it is good. It is very good. And it's worth it. Guys, it's okay to wake up. It's okay to accept responsibility. It is joyful. That's what we're going for, is joy.
right.
So, TJ, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to make sure we cover before we close today?
No, I'm so grateful for this conversation. I think what we've been exploring is really at the root of the message I want to bring to the world. I always want to offer, if no one has told you today, you came into the world as an infinite being, and that's still the ultimate truth of who and what you are. So everything we've discussed is everything that's so near and dear to my heart. So thank you for creating this beautiful space for this conversation.
Oh, thank you for being a part of it. This is wonderful. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote by Randy Gage. He said, "The next time your core beliefs are challenged, try being curious instead of furious." Today, I invite our listeners to get curious about our core beliefs and release the core beliefs that do not serve us. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for tuning in to Linda's Corner podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends to help us inspire even more listeners. Be sure to visit hopeforhealingfoundation.org for free and affordable resources to help you overcome life's challenges. And explore healingbreathworkdetox.com, where you'll find transformative tools for deep inner healing and lasting change. Also, don't forget to check out my books, Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. Your journey to hope, healing, and happiness starts here.